In life, we see people markedly more successful than us. It's just how it is. But oftentimes we look at our friends, our peers who have had similar opportunities and experiences as us, but seem to be far more successful. This could be anything, some personal or cultural milestone, financial stability, even down to something like popularity or how many friends they have. And those thoughts aren't only justified, but in many cases are factually correct. So what does this have to do with Gunbuster? To answer that, is essential to look at Hideaki Anno, for whom Gunbuster was a directorial debut. Understanding Anno is vital to fully understanding Gunbuster and vice versa. Gunbuster can be seen as a microcosm of everything that would come to define Anno's style as a director and highlights his major strengths, those being shot composition and strong emotional personal moments. In fact, many one-to-one parallels can be drawn between Gunbuster and Anno's most famous work, and one of the most well-known and referenced work of animation ever, Neon Genesis Evangelion. The specific focus here is the first part of episode 5. The underlying tension in this first part underscores both Anno's shot composition and ability to convey meaningful, emotionally resonant ideas to the viewers in a way that becomes fully realized via the interplay between these two skills. But first, some context in the universe of Gunbuster. One of the most consequential conflicts present in the narrative is that of time dilation, a real-world physical phenomenon in which objects moving more swiftly and objects under a stronger gravitational field experience time at a slower rate. Gunbuster's willingness to showcase this phenomenon is impressive in itself, as time dilation is so seldom expressed in science fiction that many of you are likely unaware of either its existence or its presence in sci-fi. When episode 5 opens up on Noriko and Amano's high school graduation, 10 years have already passed since they attended high school. Something reinforced to Noriko when Amano, upon hearing Noriko say how lucky she is to graduate at 17, says, "You don't get it, do you? According to your birth certificate, you're 27. Noriko responds to this somewhat jokingly, saying, "I guess I'm at the age I should have kids then, eh?" Well, hello. So we have Noriko's old friend from school pass by before they realize who the other is in a somewhat confused fashion. This is a great shot that we'll get to a bit later. From here we're brought to Noriko and her friend on a swing set. Now swings in anime are an oft-used cinematic shortcut for a character's arrested development, and while here her friend is on it with her, it still works to paint Noriko as more childlike than her supposed age should make her. Noriko, despite her accomplishments, is to the onlooker frozen in childhood, a point in part conveyed by her body language. Her friend, on the other hand, is still and solemn on the swings, painting her with a more composed and mature, however equally distant mood. So let's get to the meat of this. Y'all came here to know why all your friends are more successful than you, did you not? See, from the moment Noriko said, "I'm at the age I should be having kids," in her friend's subsequent appearance, there's been a tangible disconnect with each other. Noriko's still just a kid and can't think of herself otherwise. Her friend to her represents this weird sense of reality that she's a lot older than she understands, and that in everyone else's time she's been an adult for a while now. Coming into contact with her friend who has a child at this point is weird. It makes her uncomfortable. Noriko's my generation. We're off doing our own things, living our own lives, but sometimes we see people we're friends with in high school, a time barely forgone, and they're way ahead of us. They have better jobs, more connections, more fun, relationships, those strange little things called children. God, they have children. What does that say about me? This is an even stronger feeling because just before Noriko said having children is something she should have, something to just make sense as some goal, some life milestone that should be taken for granted. She and I single-handedly drove back an invasion and yet she feels she's accomplished nothing. It's weird. Of course, the reality is this goes both ways. Her friend has a stern expression. She's stiff. She just sits solid in the swing. She's in the presence of a war hero. She, with no small exaggeration, owes her and her daughter's life to Noriko. That's some impressive stuff. She basically breaks down and begs Noriko to ensure her daughter's life. She clearly tears herself up asking this, like Noriko is holding this power over someone beneath her. Noriko has become just as strange and unrelatable to her given their lack of direct contact for so long. The post-military reunion is also a reflection of a homecoming from war or service, a time when returning home means that you might return somewhere that has become alien to you. Nowhere is this better conveyed than when they happened by each other earlier. Following Noriko's line I've talked about already, and Kumiko's appearance kid in tow, form a dichotomy apparent by their awkward pause and by the shot composition itself. They're passing by each other in opposite directions, representing their different courses in life, up to and including this point ain't rocket science, but the sentiment is furthered by their positions on screen. Noriko is moving down when they pass by each other, winding down from her earlier high. Kumiko's ascension puts her on the high ground. She's reached the milestone, parading forward with her kid in tow. This scene highlights differences in their lives a bit more by having Kumiko returning from a grocery trip, making an implication that Kumiko lives a more domestic life that centers her child, making it even more disconnected and foreign to Noriko through strengthening her high school friends, and by extension her perceived peers' assumed progress in life. These feelings as a whole can also be extended to the young Gainax of the time, as research into the Gainax House of the Air conjures in our minds the image of many single men cloistered off, dedicated to little else but their profession. With all that said, let's get into the meat. This phenomenon of your friends being more successful than you is called the friendship paradox. It's a thing. Like, a tested thing. And it's real. It basically states your friends, on average, do in fact have more friends than you. Some explain this just being people with larger amounts of friends are more likely to be friends with you, which sounds both confusing and obvious at the same time. There's even math that proves it. Check this equation out. This equation means your friends have more friends than you. How? Don't know, I'm not a math guy. But it does. Somehow. In fact, more recently, people have tested how far this goes. Does this paradox apply to people's friends, achievements, wealth, happiness? Apparently, yeah. So the way this was tested was looking at academic networks, at scientific papers. The gist of the experiment is that they looked at academic papers with co-authors, linked each co-author to their various co-authors, and sure enough, the phenomenon appears there too. If you're a scientist, your co-authors have co-authored more papers than you. Confused yet? They will apparently have more citations and publications than you too. Here's a helpful graphic. So apparently wealth and happiness meet this criteria too. Ain't that fun? This has been called the generalized friendship paradox. So let's bring it back around to how Noriko is affected by this. Do her friends have more friends than she does? Well, yeah, that seems pretty clear on all fronts but Kumiko. Are her friends more successful than her? Well, yes and no. In terms of relationships, Noriko was definitely less successful than two of her other friends, who were married in one case and had a child in the other. In terms of career? Well, using the model with co-authors, then yes, Noriko is less successful than either of her colleagues in space, at least given what is presented to us in the anime. Remembering that Noriko's climactic action in episode 4 is ultimately the result of her paralyzing fears of going into battle, it is debatable whether this one success would categorize her as more successful, but we're looking at this from the co-author model. Happiness?
Tumbling down, tumbling down, tumbling down.
So yeah, your friends have more friends than you, and are probably happier and more successful too. And there's nothing you can do.